Hi, my name is Julien Alam, and I'm going to be taking you through a Shakespeare monologue. So, Shakespeare's language can be a little bit tricky, especially because he uses heightened language, so sometimes it's not the easiest to understand at first glance. But I think once you get to know the ins and outs of the way that Shakespeare writes, you'll see that his writing is honestly really strikingly relevant and sounds a lot like the way that we today talk and act and think about a lot of these topics. So I'm going to be performing a monologue from Antony and Cleopatra. This is Cleopatra's monologue, and I'm going to go through it once, and then I'm going to touch on a bunch of the tips and tricks, kind of ins and outs that I think are useful for performing the monologue, and then I will perform it again so you can see all of that applied. So, here we go. Oh, never was their queen so mightily betrayed. Yet at the first I saw the treasons planted. Why should I think you can be mine and true, though you in swearing shake the throned gods, who have been false to Fulvia? Riotous madness to be entangled in those mouth-made vows, which break themselves in swearing. Nay, pray you, seek no colour for your going, but bid farewell and go. When you sued staying, then was the time for words. No going then. Eternity was in our lips and eyes, bliss in our brows bent, none our parts so poor, but was a race of heaven. They are so still, or thou, the greatest soldier in the world, art turned the greatest liar. Okay, so a little context. That monologue comes from Act 1, Scene 3 of Antony and Cleopatra, so quite early on in the play. So what's just happened is that Antony's received a letter about Fulvia, who is his wife, back home in Rome. And so Cleopatra is kind of coming in very hot towards Antony because they're lovers, and she thinks that he's about to be called back to Rome, or that Fulvia has found out about them, or that he's going to leave her. So she's coming in like ready to like go right at him. But what she doesn't know, and what the audience does know, is that what's in the letter is that Fulvia's actually just died. So he just got the news of her death from Rome, and he's trying to tell her that, but she will not let him get in a word in, or get a word in edgewise. So it's kind of fun for the actors of like Antony trying to speak, but Cleopatra just going right for it, not letting him get a word in. So let's go through the monologue. The very first word sound that she utters is "oh." I think that that can often be kind of tricky for actors who are not familiar with Shakespeare, because I think a lot of us have this image of very kind of a postured, kind of very old school style of performing Shakespeare, so having those O's can be a little intimidating. But actually, I had an acting teacher, I have several, who've said that in Shakespeare, a lot of the emotion lies in the vowels, and the kind of logic and reasoning lies in the consonants. I think there's exceptions to every rule, but in this case especially, the O's you can use for anything, and it kind of allows the actor to put their own specific twist on it. So for me, I feel like that first line, "never was their queen so mightily betrayed," is this like, no one's ever been so screwed over as me, like how dare you. So I kind of like using the O as like a realization moment for Cleopatra, of like looking back, being like, oh, never was their queen so mightily betrayed. And then she goes on to the, "yet at the first I saw the treasons planted." So right from the beginning, I saw the seeds of how you would betray me. Like, I should have seen this coming, in a way. And I like that line because you have the consonants of the T sound, so you can really hit Antony with that, with those T's, and even like admonish yourself for not being able to see it sooner. Like, "yet at the first I saw the treasons planted." That's kind of a fun way to kind of use the language there. So then she goes on to have this, "why should I think you can be mine and true?" And this is a great line, kind of a great example of how you can use the meter in Shakespeare to your advantage. So Shakespeare writes in iambic pentameter, which is these 5 sets of iambs, so like da 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 da. And so if you do like read out your line just like really like leaning into the meter, which you should try with all of your lines. I guarantee you'll find something. But with this one in particular, if you try it out, it'll sound weird and you wouldn't perform it like this. But you go, why should I think you can be mine and true? So obviously the mine and true, like be my man and be true, be faithful, be loyal. Like, why should I think that? You want to hit those words. And in general, you want to avoid pronouns in Shakespeare because they're often not the kind of the meat of the sentence. Like they're there. That you don't need to like overemphasize the you and I. And in fact, in the meter, the you and I aren't emphasized. It's words like, why should I think you can? Like, she's really emphasizing the impossibility of ever being able to trust him again. Like, why should I think? Not rather than the kind of the less active words of like you and I. Yeah, and so I also like that moment because it's an example of a question in Shakespeare, a rhetorical question. But I don't like to think of them as rhetorical questions because if you follow, all the way through, it's why should I think you can be mine and true, though you in swearing, though you in making promises, shake the throned gods, like are really yelling up to the gods, like promising, putting all your faith in these. Though you in swearing, shake the throned gods who have been false to Fulvia, so who have been lying, so you who have been lying to your wife, Fulvia, for all this time. So like, why should I, if you've been lying this whole time, why should I trust you? And because this is a monologue, obviously Antony doesn't respond. So it's not, say, I don't want to think about it as a rhetorical question. You do want to genuinely ask him, because when he doesn't respond, that gives you as an actor such a motivation to keep speaking. It's like, why should I trust you again? Riot is madness to be entangled in those mouth-made vows. So you see, you can use that riotous madness, like freaking crazy to be entangled in those little promises that you make. And I love that image of to be entangled in those mouth-made vows, because it really very physicalizes that sensation for the actor in a way that's really helpful. And also that term mouth-made vows, it really kind of denigrates and makes the whole idea of a vow sound, it's just mouth-made. They're just words. It doesn't mean anything, especially coming from you. And then she goes on and says, nay, pray you, seek no color. So like literally, don't try to paint this in a different light. Don't try to qualify it, but bid farewell and go. So say goodbye and get out. And then like when you sued staying, then was the time for words. So when you promised or like said you were gonna stay, then was the time that we could talk. But now that I think you're about to leave, just get out. And then we have this kind of interesting tonal shift into the whole section of eternity was in our lips and eyes, bliss in our brows bent, none our parts so poor but was a race of heaven. And that's a really beautiful little section, and it can be it sounds kind of like a 180 from the style that she's been like berating him, really just going in with these like, we saw with those hard consonants and the T's and the seek no color, like really going after him and the way that he lies. And then this section turns into all these like long vowel sounds and really beautiful poetry. And I think it shows how as an actor, your like motivation, your tactic now has switched to being appealing to the relationship, to the real love that exists between them. And I think it's really interesting the way it's laid out, because that whole section, it starts with the word eternity, ends with the word heaven. Already you can see these like big, very, very big words. But what's interesting is that they are both polysyllabic words, so they have multiple syllables. Whereas all the words in between those words, so like was in our lips and eyes, bliss in our brows bent, are all monosyllabic, so one syllable. And you kind of get that feeling of like the very small human things, like lips and eyes and brows, being framed and in this light of eternity and heaven, these really big concepts. And that's kind of what their love is. It's like, and what love in general really is, it's that marriage of like the really tiny human things and the like biggest, most insane feelings you could ever feel. So I like that little bit of poetry that you can use to your advantage. And then the very last lines are a really great example of like classic Shakespearean antithesis. So antithesis is just the comparing of two things. Sometimes we like to think of it as opposites, but it's not necessarily opposites. It's just really like on the one hand you have this, and on the other you have that. So with this, it's or thou, the greatest soldier in the world, art termed the greatest liar. So you can really use that antithesis as like a final punch right at the end, because you have like, and this here's the thing that like the world thinks you are and that you're presented as all the time, as this great soldier, when in reality here's what you actually are, as this liar and cheater. So it's a great way to be like, or thou, the greatest soldier in the world, art termed the greatest liar. And it's a great little reversal to like get him one more time, because that's the end of the monologue. All right, so with all that in mind, I'm gonna do it again, and hopefully you can pick up on some of these notes that I was talking about. Oh, never was their queen so mightily betrayed. Yet at the first I saw the treasons planted. Why should I think you can be mine and true, though you in swearing shake the throned gods who have been false to Fulvia? Riotous madness to be entangled in those mouth-made vows which break themselves in swearing. Nay, pray you, seek no colour for your going, but bid farewell and go. When you sued staying, then was the time for words, no going then. Eternity was in our lips and eyes, bliss in our brows bent. None our parts so poor, but was a race of heaven. They are so still. Or thou, the greatest soldier in the world, art termed the greatest liar. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of a Shakespeare monologue.